Vincent, today Wolseley had their results out, and it's obviously an interesting company because it's a big macro play, obviously being in the house building market. What really stood out from their results today?
Well, it is an interesting sort of macroeconomic bellwether. Wolseley is the world's biggest supplier to the trade of plumbing and heating equipment, which is basically as sort of basic and unglamorous a business as you can get. And it's a very big operator in this market, the world's biggest in the US. It's very entrenched in Europe, so it has considerable heft. And today it had its annual results, revenue up a little bit. But it's been doing relatively well over the last few years because it's been managing its cash very carefully. So this year, to accompany the final results, it announced a special dividend, a big increase in the regular dividend, and it seems to be riding the downturn in the housing market globally in a fairly robust fashion, I think.
Okay, so you're saying they're paying a dividend, but is that okay, and there's a downturn, is that really the best use of their cash right now, though?
I think it probably is in the circumstances. Wolseley has undergone quite a transformation over the last 4 or 5 years. Back in 2008, it had debt of £3 billion. Now it's almost entirely debt-free. So it has, it's a much lighter company than it was, and it's much more focused on sort of cash management, and it generates a lot of cash on a day-to-day basis, and it's focused on managing that better and getting margins better, and so it's in a position now to decide what to do with the cash, and because it has decided that there's nothing out there it wants to buy, this is a way of giving this back to shareholders. There's been a couple of sales over the last 12 months or so that generated about £300 million. So it's basically paying that out in the form of a special dividend. I think it's the right thing to do in the circumstances.
Okay, so they're sort of managing the bottom line really in the downturn. But overall, what's the outlook now for the housing market? Well,
I mean, it's not very good, actually. If you look across Europe, for example, and Wolseley has a very big business in France, just as an example. Last week the French government announced a lot of austerity measures. Europe is in that kind of mode. So it's, the housing market and government support for housing is shrinking simply because they can't afford it. So, for example, the new build market in France has fallen from about 430,000 a year a couple of years ago to 375,000 now, and it's still contracting. So it's the outlook for the housing market is actually fairly grim, and it's a question of managing that to the best of one's ability.
Right, so I mean overall, although the housing market, as you say, the outlook isn't as good as perhaps it used to be, Wolseley are doing well to sort of focus on the bottom line under these circumstances. Thanks, Vincent.